Tommy.
How's it going, man?
Episode 63.
Yeah.
1 year anniversary show.
That's crazy.
Started?
I'm ready to get started, man. This is awesome. I'm really excited for this one.
Agility from the champion. Oh, deep six! That could be it. Delivers this deep six.
Good evening, Deep Six Pro Wrestling Podcast fans. This is episode 63, our 1 year anniversary show. Tommy, how you doing, man?
I am doing great, man. Today's been a good day. It's only going to get better, man. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So, to those of you guys that are watching, we're going to jump in really quick. We got a special guest for you. This really comes full circle for us. This person we are bringing on is part of our story of our beginning, so to speak. And I'm definitely honored to be able to have this guest that we're about to introduce you. But we have Chris Van Vliet hopping on, TV host, YouTuber, podcast host for Insight and more. Let's welcome him right now. Chris, how you doing?
Gentlemen, happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for hopping on. We welcome you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Like I said before, I mean, this is an honor for me. You're one of the people that kind of made me want to get into broadcasting, at college and being able to listen to you and listen to how much you've grown, as an interviewer and just be able to see that and how, I mean, you have it right there on that sign, be great, be grateful. I think that's such a perfect way to live life. So like I said, thank you again for hopping on here.
Oh, of course, Tommy. And thank you for the kind words, Wayne. Thank you for reaching out and having me on here. 63 episodes is nothing to, be ashamed of. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a lot of work. We've done some watch-alongs, we've done some post shows. It's probably really about up to 80 or so. But yeah, we're 1 year in. We're enjoying every bit of this ride. And so Chris, I just want to ask you before we jump into our everything. How are you doing out there in Los Angeles? How's the West Coast treating you?
Life's pretty good. Life's pretty good out here. I've been here now for 9 months. I moved here last summer, right in the heart of the pandemic. I moved here thinking like, I better get out here soon because stuff's going to open up. And, here we are 13 months into this, but things are starting to open up. I think today, as we record this, Disneyland is opening back up. So life's good. I mean, I live in a place where it's 75 degrees and sunny, like 361 days a year. I mean, there's nothing to complain about.
Can't complain about that one.
That is great. Oh, you have WrestleMania coming to you next year, I believe.
Yeah, 2 years. I mean, it was supposed to be this year.
Oh, 2 years. 2 years, yeah.
It was supposed to be this year, then back to Tampa, now Dallas next year, to be the biggest WrestleMania ever.
Yeah.
Then Hollywood the year after that. So, yeah, if you guys are out here, beers are on me.
Thank you.
I'll definitely take you up on that. That's for sure if I'm not there.
You're definitely one of my favorite Emmy Award-winning personalities, I must say. But I hope you don't disappear after this, but John Alba has got to be one of my all-time favorites.
Oh, really? I'm so sorry to hear that. No, John's great. We have some healthy banter back and forth, and I just like to remind him that while he has one Emmy, I have 4 of them. So I think that makes me 4 times better than John Alba.
So they're doing some awesome stuff. I'm personally a Patreon of his with the Living the Gimmick podcast. Him and Doug McDonald do some great work. And their podcast has actually kind of inspired us and the Wrestle Reaction team, Frank Manzo and JT. They've done some great work. But John's awesome. But yes, you have him beat 4-1 for sure. So he's got some work to do.
Yeah, he challenged me to some sort of a match the other day on Twitter, and I spent the next half hour laughing. And then after I recovered from laughing, I asked him if I would have to lose 40 pounds of muscle mass in order to make this a fair fight. To which I think he appreciated that.
You got to make it fair. It's the best way to do it.
That's awesome. So let's get into it. Why don't we? So our first question today for you, we see we did a little digging, and I'm definitely very personally inspired by some of the work you've done, your accomplishments. I was even thinking to myself, oh man, where do I begin? I'm looking at everything here. I'm like, wow. But we see that you were involved with one of your first on-air jobs with Chex TV in Canada. Eventually going to Vancouver. I love Vancouver, by the way. Great city, not too far from Seattle. You hosted and produced Razor Televisions, which eventually became MTV.
MTV2, yeah.
And then you hosted Inside Jam, Cosmopolitan Magazine 2012, Bachelor of the Year. I'm gonna need some tips from you there.
I think I need to reread those articles and figure it out. It's been a while.
It's been a hot minute.
You worked with, we know you worked with some indie promotions, including AEW, which we may touch on a little later. But my question to you is, what are some of the steps that you took to get to where your career started, and what are some of the challenges or obstacles you may have faced to get to where you got to today?
It's a great question because it started for me with a goal. And, you guys know, I always say vague goals give vague results. So for me, it started with a goal of if we take this way back, 4 years old, had a Fisher-Price tape recorder, was pretending to be a radio personality. That's where it began way back. High school, we had a communication studies class where we would make television segments every single week. We would write them out and then we would play different roles, camera guy, audio guy, editor. You do all this stuff. And I just loved being in front of the camera. And I was the vice president of my student council, hosted the talent show, hosted the fashion show, did the morning announcements, and just loved being able to evoke that reaction out of people. So when it came time to pick a college major, I said, well, communication studies, that was a fun high school course. I'll major in that in college. I mean, you're 17 trying to determine what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. So I went to college for communication studies, had a great time, lived with 4 of my best friends. And we were having so much fun there. And it hit me in my senior year. I woke up one day and it was 7 months from graduation. It just hit me oh my gosh, when we graduate at the end of this year, that's it. You got to go to the real world for the rest of your life. And it hit me in that moment that I didn't want to hate my job. I didn't want to be one of those people who couldn't appreciate Sunday because Monday was the next day. So I made it my goal that I was going to do whatever I could to stack the odds in my favor. So I reached out to every radio station in my college town, every TV station in my college town, said, I'm passionate about broadcasting. I want to do this for a living. Can I come in and just see how it's done in the real world and volunteer? One radio station brought me in on their street team, handed out stickers and buttons at different events. This other TV station was basically run by volunteers. All the volunteer positions in production were done by volunteers. So I did VTR, audio, floor directing. And then this other radio station said, well, we don't really take on volunteers, but how would you like a job? And I went, oh my gosh, yes. It said it only pays $8 an hour. I said, well, that's $8 more than I thought I was going to make. That's where the journey began with me going, okay, this is the thing I want to do. I am way back here at step 1. How can I start to take these incremental steps to get to that goal? So had, some stuff on my resume. And then when I came time for graduation, I said, I need an internship. I need to figure out an internship, which can hopefully build up a demo reel so I can at least take it somewhere else and go, hey, look, I can kind of do this TV thing. I reached out to a bunch of TV stations, didn't hear back from anybody. And then I found the email for the general manager at Chex TV, the station that you mentioned, Wayne. Found the email for the general manager, cold emailed him, lied to him, and said, I'm going to be in town next week for spring break. Could I just come in and chat with you? A total lie. I hadn't been to that town in 10 years. And he goes, well, you're going to be in town. Sure. Come on by. So I went by and he looked at my resume, said, hey, you've been doing some stuff here. We don't usually bring on interns that aren't affiliated with like a school program, but what the heck? Sure. You can start in June or in May. And that was really how it all began. And I was driving an hour each way to my internship, which of course paid nothing. I was working my high school job at the pet store, at the mall, in the fish department, so I could pay for the gas to drive to my internship. Long story short, the internship ended up turning into a job, and that's how I really got my start. 2 weeks into my internship, they put me on TV as a reporter. Man. And that was how the rest of my internship worked, and just kind of took every shift from that moment on to just keep building and trying to get better.
That's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so cool. Like you said, you know, I'm 23, so being able, like, I just came out of college, gosh, right into the coronavirus, and you know, knowing what you've said, you know, like with the way, like how you had to, you know, kind of basically find what you wanted to do, and having that at such a young age, and that's awesome, man. That really is very inspiring. Make me want to keep going with what I'm doing, you know, stay passionate about it.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys are doing it by doing this. Like, this didn't exist in 2005 when I graduated from college. Like, YouTube didn't exist. Social media Facebook didn't exist where I lived, but like none of this existed. So the fact that you can now have your own podcast, YouTube channel, TikTok, all that stuff, I think puts you so many steps further ahead than I ever had a chance to be.
Yeah, I think I've read some of your interviews and stuff, and tried to get as much from you as I can. Like I said, I've been an active listener for at least the last year. I think one of the things that you talk about is if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're already setting yourself up to fail. Like you can have people who start their own podcasts, and people can also, you know, start their own podcast and not do anything with it. So no, yeah. I think that what you've done in being able to create the image that you have, and in both the entertainment and the wrestling world, is incredible.
Well, I say passion is the secret sauce of life. And that's not just in your career, that's in every aspect of your life. Like, can you imagine having a boyfriend, a girlfriend, husband, or wife, and there's no passion there? Like, it'd be awful, right? So I think that whatever it is that you're doing in your life, sprinkle a little bit of passion on that, and it just gets taken up to that next level. And you're right, Tommy, like anyone can start a podcast. Like, that's the best thing about podcasting. Anyone can start a podcast. The worst thing about podcasting is anybody can have a podcast. And I think what you got to do is stick with it and have that passion, because if you're going into this and you don't enjoy every single step of the process, and you guys know this well, everything from writing the show to booking the show to editing the show to uploading the show and everything in between, if you don't love every single step, maybe you should just stop right now, because it's not going to get any easier. Yeah.
Me and Wayne kind of joked about it WrestleMania weekend, you know, with TakeOver and SmackDown. We did 5 episodes in 5 nights, and it was a grind, but you know, like you said, it's that passion, and I want to talk about that passion with you, because you know, you've talked about how you've got to where you are, but where did your passion for wrestling come from?
So I was like aware of wrestling growing up. So I was born in 1983. So like aware of it in the late 80s, early 90s. It would just be on at my grandparents' house. Not that my grandpa was like a huge wrestling fan, but he just liked having sports on the TV. So of course, a lot of hockey on the TV growing up in Canada, maybe a little bit of baseball, basketball. But if that wasn't on, wrestling would be on a Saturday night. So I became aware of it then, but I became a massive fan in the Attitude Era. So late 90s, I'm in high school. One of my very best friends named Vince, we would talk on the phone. A crazy thing you used to do in the 90s, talking on the phone.
Not anymore.
Right. And I knew every Monday night at 9:00, our call would abruptly come to an end because he was a huge fan of wrestling.
Yep.
And then there was one Monday when we were in the middle of saying something and we weren't quite done our conversation. I said, all right, man, I'll turn on the TV. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on here, and then the commercial break, like, you know, we'll finish our conversation. And I just got so sucked into the storyline. Austin McMahon was the big storyline at that time. And I went from watching 0 hours, 0 minutes of wrestling to watching everything, like Raw and Thunder and Nitro and Jack and Heat, everything. And I was on the high school wrestling team. at that time. And I remember them, like my coach being like, oh, well, what we do in here is real and what they do there is fake. Like you always hear that, that sentiment. But being on the high school wrestling team and being a pro wrestling fan, I think made me appreciate both of them that much more. Quickly, we started a backyard wrestling federation, which I was the 2-time champion of. Chris Sharp.
I love it.
My gimmick name. Sharp talking, sharp walking, sharp dressing.
That's amazing.
That's perfect.
So yeah, I was a backyard wrestler and then had dreams of like, all right, I loved this so much. I was already fairly athletic, grew up playing hockey and baseball, high school wrestling team. Like I said, ran track and field, ran cross country. Like I was very athletic. I was lifting weights starting at age 15. So I was already like very athletic. And then here we were in the backyard, like mimicking, don't try this at home. It's exactly what we were doing, mimicking our favorite wrestlers on TV. And I said to one of my buddies, I said, when we have the money and we're old enough, we're going to wrestling school. Like, let's shake on it. We're going to make a pact out of this. And he said, absolutely, for sure. He didn't hold his end of the bargain up, but I did. I ended up going to wrestling school and I trained in Toronto for a few months while I was in college. So my goal was to be a pro wrestler. And like,
let me ask you, who did you mimic? What
probably
pro wrestlers did you try to mimic?
Yeah, definitely a lot of Triple H at the time. We're talking 2000, 2001. I had my right hand and wrist taped and just my left wrist taped. I chewed gum during promos. I healed.
Water.
I definitely spit water in my entrance. Yeah, it was.
That's great.
I didn't do the. I just poured it down my face a little bit, spit it out a little bit. Yeah, it was, oh, geez.
That's perfect.
So I definitely mimicked a lot of Triple H, but I was, I wasn't clearly the size of Triple H. So I was doing like the Swanton Bomb as my finisher and like also heavily inspired by Jeff Hardy. I would do the Twist of Fate. Yeah, it's so funny to like look back on like how lucky we were to not have gotten more injured. I had one buddy, Will, Danny Courageous was his wrestling name. He broke his leg twice, but other than that, we were pretty good.
Jeez, that's something, man. Because I think it's so weird, and what I think is kind of different about our podcast. Me and Wayne talk about it is just the age gap that we have and the different experiences that we have. You're talking about getting into wrestling in 99. I was born in 98, so I didn't become a wrestling fan. I want to say like 2002, but in that same vein, like. I saw John Cena. I was a big Ric Flair fan at the time, and or Batista, I see all those guys, and I start like wrestling my older brother, out in the backyard. We'd be doing stuff like that. It made me want to get into. I did wrestling up till middle school, and being able to, just appreciate it more. But I also think that being a fan of pro wrestling really makes me understand just how much work these people put in, the media opinion, and you would know it obviously with doing as many, interviews and being able to talk to these people, how much work it takes, but they're training every day, doing media, then they're doing the show, then they're moving to the next town. I mean, it's such an impressive thing that I think not a lot of people really understand or want to understand. I think everybody just wants to say that, oh, it's fake. And, it's not, in a sense. It's definitely something that we can obviously the passion through in a lot of the wrestlers who do it.
Well, I think that people need to realize it's a TV show. Every TV show is fake in some sort of way, but like to call wrestling fake doesn't really make sense. Scripted, sure, yes. And I've been backstage at all the shows. Yeah, there is a literal script. Maybe not for like every move in the match, but there's a literal script of like, this match is going to be this long, then it's going to go to commercial. And then when we come back from commercial, this thing's going to happen. So yeah, people definitely do not appreciate it. And like some of the interviews I would do when I was working in Cleveland or Miami in television, you would have people like in Miami, they'd have a show the night before in Orlando. After the show is done, they would then rent a car, drive down to Miami, and then do an interview with me at like 7 a.m. And I'm like, how much sleep did you get last night? Like, I got in at 3:30, and it's crazy the grind that in a pre-COVID world that they were on.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's, like I said, that's what makes me appreciate it so much more. But I want to ask you, you got your YouTube button up there, you got your 4 Emmys, you even got that personalized title belt. What would you say is the greatest material thing, that you've gotten from doing your job, being able, whether it's those Emmys or, having the reach that you've had, starting YouTube and being able to have that? I mean, what is something that you really are appreciative of, from what you've gotten?
If it's a material thing, it's probably the first Emmy that I won, because I'm from Canada. It is not easy to immigrate to this fine country of yours. And I was on a visa when I first moved here. I was living in Cleveland. I was on an O1 visa. And I was like 2 years into this visa. It's a 3-year visa. You can only work for the company who sponsors your visa. And I was looking into like, what are my options? Like, get a green card and I stay here permanently and maybe work somewhere else if that ends up happening. And I was speaking to an immigration lawyer, and he basically said, they want to see that you've actually done stuff like to make you stay here. Like, you got to win awards. You got to like have press about you. And I went, okay, well, like, I've been nominated for an Emmy. He's like, it's okay. It's like, if you win an Emmy, that probably really increases your chances. And then the Emmy nominations came out like a month later. And then the actual Emmy Awards were a few months after that. And he basically said, call me after the Emmy Awards and, we'll look at your case from there. And I was so fortunate that night. I mean, huge honor just to be nominated. But that night I won not 1, but 2 in the same night. And I was like so excited. And I remember like that Monday calling him up and being like, I won 2 Emmys. And he's like, well, you're probably going to get a green card now. So
that's awesome.
We talked earlier about those incremental steps, and those were 2 really big steps, the Emmy to then the green card application, which, I'm now fortunate to say I've been living here in America for 11 years now.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
That's amazing. So, I noticed that you have a podcast. It's called Insight. And I think that's actually the perfect name for your podcast, because in your interviews, what we're doing now and on the podcast, you provide lots of insight. One particular episode which resonated with me recently was episode 192 with Kevin Kwan, who happens to be the photographer of Kevin Hart, and the questions that were asked and how his journey to getting to where he got to was very, very intriguing and insightful. So what inspired this podcast that you're doing right now?
First of all, Wayne, thank you for listening to one of my episodes that is not a wrestling episode. That is so kind of you. Thank you.
I honestly saw a photographer. I'm like, let me check this out.
Yeah. So Kevin Kwan is Kevin Hart's personal photographer. He's been on the road with him for like something like 14 years now. So my show was called The Chris Van Vliet Show for a while. And the reason was I didn't really think about starting a podcast. My podcast is about to turn 2 years old, but I didn't really plan on starting a podcast. I had a YouTube channel that was doing pretty well at the time. And I kind of thought that the podcast would cannibalize the YouTube views. So I was like, well, I don't want to take anything away from the YouTube views because, it seems to be growing at a decent pace. Then I realized, no, they're 2 completely different audiences. My interviews are like an hour-ish in length. I'm very aware that not too many people are going to keep YouTube on for an hour to watch us do an interview. Totally aware of that. An hour on a podcast, though, that's, pretty par for the course. So I just started taking the audio from my YouTube interviews, throwing it up on the podcast. And I'm like, well, this thing needs a name. Call it The Chris Van Vliet Show. And then I was realizing, like, this show's not about me at all. Like, to call it The Chris Van Vliet Show doesn't even make sense. So I started talking with my podcast network, Blue Wire, and they're awesome. We started just talking about, like, what is the show really about? And it just, for me, just kept coming back to Insight. And I kind of selfishly in these interviews pick little pieces apart from these people that are super successful so I can apply them to my own life. Like, that's the whole thing here. I'm just like trying to be a student, like learning from these greats. Like, they're at the top for a reason. So I want to like learn, what are these tactics? What are these tricks along the way? So, Yeah, I've had really, obviously, a bunch of wrestlers, and we get to hear like their cool backstories. But we've also had people like Kevin Kwan on, or Grant Cardone, Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC, Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees, Andrew Yang. Like there's been some really cool conversations, and I just love being able to like figure out like, okay, you're doing this thing. How? Like, how can I then do that thing?
That's amazing. That's exactly the takeaway that I got out of listening to that particular episode of the ideas, even to the detail of you asking what kind of camera he uses, what kind of camera lens he uses. Me, as doing photography on the side as a hobby, and I've had done a couple paid jobs, but that interests me. So that resonated with me. Those are excellent questions, excellent insight that you guys were bouncing off of each other. So I knew you chose the perfect name for that because it very, very insightful.
Oh, well, thank you. I learned something like early on when I was posting these interviews on YouTube. My YouTube channel is now 10 years old. I would post interviews with any of the celebrities, the Hollywood actors that I was interviewing. And you would think like one of these big questions that you asked would be the thing that people cared about. Then you go to the comments section and they would be like, and I'm making this up, but they'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe he shoots on a Canon M50. That's the camera I use. And like, it'd be such a throwaway like discussion or throwaway part of the conversation. I realized, oh, that's what fans really want to hear. They want to hear something that like this person has never spoken about.
And Kevin Kwan was great in that interview. That's an interview that I will absolutely, episode 192 is, I'm going to share that with my photography buddies. I have a number of them, but that's like an episode that I'll continue to go back to because of the detail that Kevin Kwan gave about his journey. I thought that was pretty inspiring for sure.
That's cool. I will let him know that. I mean, he will love that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. Like we said, being able to talk about just what you're passionate about and being able to, one of the things that I love about your show is, like you said, you don't make it about you. You want people to realize that all these people that you're interviewing, whether it's an entertainer or photographer, a different podcaster, or a wrestler, you want them to, you want to be able to show to your audience that it's all the same. We're all people in the same, we're all human in the same way. We all do stuff that, we nerd out about. We all have little stories that you can relate to. So I think that's such a cool thing. One of the things that you do is you really just let your people talk. And like one of my favorite episodes is your episode with Conrad Thompson. I'm a huge Conrad fan. I subscribe to ad-free shows and listen to all his shows. But I got to ask you, that passion that you have for wrestling, for entertainment, for everything that you've done, is there a match or a storyline or something that really defines your love for wrestling? I know you're a huge Dwayne Johnson fan, The Rock. I mean, is there something that kind of made you be a wrestling fan outside of, just seeing it on TV?
I mean, I think that Austin McMahon storyline was what really sucked me in. And, I have this poster here that I'm so proud of, WrestleMania 18.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
That's my ticket in the bottom corner there. Sat in the sixth row at Sky Dome in Toronto.
I was so close to going to that Mania. My first my first one wasn't until 20.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Still haven't been to one, but one day.
But I remember, I'm as old as WrestleMania. So at WrestleMania 18, I was 18, wow. And I remember standing outside of that with my friends, and we were in college, and I'm like, do we really want to go? Are we sure? Like, I mean, the tickets are like $135, which in college is a lot of money.
Very much so.
Do we want to go? I bet you we could scalp these tickets for like $200 and then like go to the bar. I had a fake ID. Go to the bar. The drinking age in Canada is 19, so don't tell my mom. Go to the bar and just like drink and watch WrestleMania on TV. And there were three of us, me and my buddy Trevor and Greg, and we kind of went, let's go in. And man, I am so glad 19 years later that we made that decision to go in, because I believe in my heart that Rock Hogan's the greatest wrestling match of all time. And just in terms of the crowd reaction.
Yes, the crowd.
The crowd made that match. And I fully went into that match expecting that to cheer for The Rock. And he couldn't. You couldn't. You had to cheer for Hogan. So we're all cheering for Hogan. And I told Rock this story the first time I interviewed him. And he goes, "Oh, yeah. It's cool you were there that night. Who were you cheering for?" I went, "Yeah, I was cheering for Hogan." He goes, "Me too."
Wow.
That's awesome.
How many WrestleManias you been to?
10. I've now been to 10 WrestleManias.
Ooh.
I went to night 2 of WrestleMania 37.
Yes,
Tampa,
I saw your picture up there. Yeah.
We are tied.
Oh, okay.
We're tied.
Oh, I got a head start on you. I started at 18, but then I didn't go again till 27.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah, we started running through starting 2023 and all through the 20s. We skipped 25. Thank God. It wasn't a great mania at all by any means. 31, I regret missing 31 because we planned a baseball trip where we cleaned up 5 stadiums in one trip in California.
Yeah.
So I ended up there anyway 2 months later for my first time.
Yeah.
But 31 was a great mania. I regret missing that one.
I left 31. I had a red-eye flight that night. So right when Seth came out and cashed in and his music hit and the fireworks started going off, me and my friends literally sprinted out of the stadium to get an Uber. To my buddy Alex's rental car, to then get to the airport, to then barely make our flights.
That's a great story. Yeah, I'm lagging behind you guys. I'm at 0. So one day I'll go to a WrestleMania.
Oh, Texas.
We're gonna get you. Yeah, Texas is next year.
That's
Great
the plan,
state.
yeah.
Dallas is a great city. I can't wait to get some of that Texas food, and there'll be some familiar. John Alba's even going to be there next year, so definitely can't wait to catch up with him. Before we start coming in for landing, a good friend of mine, his name is Joe, Army veteran and great guy, and he asked me to ask you a question, so I want to try to ask this as best as possible. But how do you feel about brands, federations working with other federations? Do you think that that these organizations are onto something big? Do you think World Wrestling Entertainment should maybe start dabbling into this? Could this be the launch of something new that we haven't seen in 20 years?
It's a great question, Joe. Thank you for asking. I think that when we saw AEW and Impact Wrestling work together, it was pretty exciting to start to see some of those dream matches that we've always talked about. But this isn't really anything too new. ECW did stuff with WWE. New Japan did stuff with Ring of Honor. I don't know that WWE, at the level that it's at right now, needs to collaborate with anybody. I think it'd be interesting, but WWE is this global brand that they always talk about. And that is not a disparaging comment about AEW or Impact or Ring of Honor or New Japan or anything like that. But WWE is, they're this well-oiled machine. And I don't know if they really need to do any sort of collaborations. Would I like to see it one day? Hell yeah. It'd be so cool to see it. I just think that that's not something that we're going to see anytime soon. I think that AEW helping Impact and Impact helping AEW, I think works really well, but I don't know that we need to see that.
Do you think Impact is benefiting through this?
Of course Impact's benefiting from this. I think that there's a lot of people who were very lapsed on TNA or Impact Wrestling. And I think that when that first storyline happened with Don Callis and Kenny Omega, and it was brilliantly done too, right?
So
Don
well
Callis
done.
was just the commentator. It
So
kind of made sense. He was commentating on Impact. He's commentating here. He's friends with Kenny Omega. Makes sense. That storyline was so well done. Then they leave and they basically go, "We'll have answers for you on Impact on Tuesday." It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, their ratings were, I don't know how much bigger, but significantly bigger that Tuesday night on Impact.
Yeah, I remember that first. I think I was watching it on Twitch or something, and their numbers were just incredible. So many people wanted to see just what was going on, and I mean, you even see that with what happened with Rebellion this past week. The amount of buys that they got is insane. It's so good to see Impact get that rub from AEW and be able to share the spotlight.
250,000 that night. That night that Kenny Omega showed up on Impact, which the segment I believe was in their bus. So it was the first
which
night.
is like 10 times what Impact was normally getting. So yeah, I mean, I think the answer is obvious that this is helping Impact for sure.
Absolutely.
We got to ask you one more question, if that's okay. Got to make it kind of a little fun one. I know that you always ask this one question at the end of your interviews, so I got to ask it to you. Like we talked about here with be great, be grateful sign that you have. What are 3 things that you're grateful for? Being able to do what you do and enjoy. Just how much. I imagine you're just having a bunch of fun doing this. This is a dream for you, and hopefully it's something that I can be able to do in the future. But yeah, what are the 3 things that you're grateful for?
Well, you can absolutely do this. I always say that if somebody else is doing the thing that you want to do, that just means that it's possible for you to do it. You just got to figure out, where to start. But I love gratitude. And I think that if you can be appreciative in every situation rather than having expectations, your life just completely changes. So I start and end every day saying out loud 3 things I'm grateful for. So, thank you for this. Putting this.
They got a little ticker for you.
I'm grateful for that. But my health, especially during this, time that we're living in right now, I'm grateful for my health and the health of my family. Also grateful for my family. My mom and dad have been married for 47 years, and they are best friends, Dirk and Helen Van Vliet. And they have this shining example of what a relationship and a friendship and a partnership can be like. So grateful for them and my sister and her husband and my niece and nephews. Super grateful for them. And I'm just grateful that we all have the ability to chase after whatever it is that we want to do. I'm so grateful that we live in a time where all 3 of us are in 3 completely different parts of the country. And we're speaking as if we're next to each other. We have a supercomputer that lives in our pocket. And we have the ability, if you want to work hard enough, you can accomplish anything that you want. And I'm super grateful that we're living in this time right now.
I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate your passion for this, being able to do podcasting and doing the communication studies and just your passion for wrestling. I thank you very much for being an inspiration, because like I said, you're definitely somebody that I look up to in this journalistic style world that we're all in. So thank you again.
No, and thank you. And congrats to both of you guys. I always say that the 2 hardest things about podcasting are, number 1, actually starting the podcast, because everybody has a great idea. Everybody thinks they're super entertaining or super funny, and then they never actually, hit record and make a podcast. But number 2, actually keeping that podcast going. And I don't remember what the stat is, but it's something like 60 or 80% of podcasts give up after 7 episodes. And I get it. You guys know how it is. You put all this work into it, and those first few episodes, you're like, oh, there's not as many people listening as I thought there might be. But you just kind of keep that going and building that momentum. So congrats to you guys on staying with it and building what you've built here.
Chris, thank you so much for hopping on. We're truly grateful. And just for the time that you've given us to get to know you. And even doing the research up into this interview was inspiring to me and inspiring to Tommy. So yeah, we just want to let you know we're grateful for you, and what you do definitely doesn't go unnoticed for sure. We know you've done some good stuff for people, and especially hopping on our podcast, being so new, 1 year old, and we just thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we wish you the best in all that you do, and keep those Emmys going. You could still build on that lead. Three Emmy lead. I don't know. John.
Well, I just recently lost. I was nominated for another one a few months ago and lost. So I was really hoping I could say to John Alba that I was the five-time.
I love it.
But no.
I cannot wait for that. I definitely cannot wait for that. But to all you guys that are going to be watching, thank you so much for listening and watching. We will be back next week with episode 64, previewing and predicting Backlash. But in the meantime, all you guys that are watching, thank you so much and have a great night.